Greetings, everyone. We're super excited that you're here for our first California Seth Conference interview. And today we're going to interview a very, very special guest. She's coming to us all the way from Hawaii. And of course, let's remember it's 7 in the morning in Hawaii. So good morning, Helen.
Good morning. How are you?
We're good. And so I will be your host today, and Lilia Agüero, she will be co-host. And so a little bit about us. We have been putting this conference together really in a very inspirational way. We've been bringing it, in a sense, directly from Framework 2, from what we know as the non-physical realities. We're receiving inspiration and acting on it as our passion. And it's really been beautifully coming together. And we've been talking a little bit behind the scenes before we got going live here, that it's not the struggle of the world. It's really, there's challenges, yes, but it's allowing it to manifest into this world by acting on our passion and literally channeling it into being, because in one sense it's already done and we're just allowing it to materialize and crystallize. I believe that's actually one of the things Helen mentioned in her bio. She appreciates that. How do events come from Framework 2 and precipitate into Framework 1, which a lot of us as Seth readers, of course, recognize that. And we're really happy to have our co-host here, Lilia Agüero. She is fairly new to the material, but definitely not new to the mysteries. And she is a very gifted tarot reader. And she really understands the workings of symbology and how our higher minds communicate through symbols, whether it's the tarot or whether it's any symbols in our lives. And she's able to pick up on the message and follow those threads of consciousness to decipher what our life events and the various symbols in our lives mean. So we're very, very happy to have her here. And since we have Helen on here, I'm not gonna introduce her. I'll let her introduce and speak for herself. So if you could give us an introduction, that would be wonderful.
Well, hi, everybody. There will be some familiar faces I know and some I've never met yet, except in the dream state, probably. I've been reading the Seth material since around 1972, believe it or not. And somehow things clicked. It was one of the other presenters said, oh yeah, this is what I've always known, a little crazy. So when I was in graduate school and they talked about probabilities as flipping a coin or a card deck, is it going to be an ace or a king or a queen? I'm looking at probabilities like which life, which world, which planet, which version of me. And I'm sure that without the Seth material, I'd be ready to be locked up somewhere, except that there has always been, I guess, since I was maybe 4, this sense of other forms of consciousness, of purpose. I was born during World War II. I'm getting old in this framework. And I was born in World War II. And when my dad came back from serving in the military, they decided to christen me because my dad was a minister. And in that christening ceremony, I felt like an adult who was using that moment to claim my own purpose in the world. Now, how do you do that? 4 years old. And I'm saying, one, I know I'm not quite from here. I knew that already. But the other thing I knew was that there was some reason I was here. And that was my declaration to follow some yet unknown and undeveloped contribution, I think. So service has always been big for me. Yes. And the sense of being a part of a whole has always been big for me. Except, being crazy, I mean, that was expressed in about 15 different ways during my professional career. So here I am. We can talk about the work a little bit if you want to do that.
Sure. So I've come to realize you have a book out there called 7 Seconds or Less, From Gut Feeling to Bottom Line in Changing or Challenging Areas of Business. It sounds like you're applying the Seth material to your work and obviously to that book as well. So yeah, we can unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, you know, remember when Seth talked about being able to take the corner of a newspaper and know what's in the entire newspaper?
Right,
That's
right.
kind of how I work. Basically,
Okay.
I work with a name. That's all I use to anchor. And so when you're working with a publicly traded company and all you want is a name, it's like, what do you mean you don't want spreadsheets? You don't want our 10-year strategic plan? You don't want, no, just give me a name. We'll go with that.
Wow. So you're really doing a very deep intuitive reading and in a sense, almost not allowing the trappings of physical reality to cloud your view. You first let your intuition give you an impression before you get all the details. So you're accessing the information through your inner channels of information rather than through the standard 5 senses. You know, let me look at the spreadsheets, let me listen to this person, that person's opinions. You're actually getting it through the inner channels. So that's pretty impressive. Very Sethian of you.
Yeah. Well, you know, what I say is the less I know, the better, because, you know, I spent 45 years in the university. I can talk. You know, I can find reasons. My rational mind is well developed, I think. So if I'm working with a publicly traded company, there's news, there are names, there are all kinds of things. I have to get all of that out of the way.
Right. And allow your inner channels to work for you.
Exactly. So if I'm working with an individual, I'll say, tell me your name. If I'm working and getting information for a company, what's the name of the company? You know, there's a lot of discussion about whether, and I think businesses use this in weird ways, whether a company is a person. And whether they have the rights of a person. What I say is a company is not a person, but it does have identity.
Yes, it is a living entity.
Yes.
Even what we're seeing with the conference, it's taken on a life of its own. Exactly. And we're cells within this larger organism that is the conference.
Exactly.
And we're you know, to the degree that we follow our passion and translate who we truly are, to that degree, then that company or this organization, you know, we even use the word organization, you know, even our language reflects that these are living entities and we are portions of these larger entities, and we're becoming aware of that. So that's really interesting. I really like that perspective. And it is very Sethian.
It is. And that's why leadership is important. So I focus usually when I'm working with companies on the CEO or the COO or somebody who has decision-making authority, because their worldview shapes the success or lack of success of the company. So they have to know themselves as well as the organization they're managing, running, creating.
Right, because they're setting a tone for the vibration. It's like they're the heart of the mandala, and whatever vibration they are in, that reverberates through the organization, and it sets the tone. And it also determines like what kind of people they will even attract. They're holding a very expansive vision. They would attract people who are in that expansive field. If they're feeling very contracted, they might start attracting people that are more contracted in nature as well. So that's very interesting. And also what they inspire from the employees and, you know, everyone else in the organization. Are they really constricted? And everyone feels that constriction, and it just ripples through the organization. So yeah, of course, that makes sense.
And remember, in talking with them, I don't speak Seth. I speak business.
Yes, you have to couch it into terms they understand. Yes.
It has all of this, you know, you don't go into a boardroom and go into trance. You don't talk about metaphysics in that way. I talk about the long-term vision or mission of the organization.
Right.
I talk about leadership style or management style. It's, you know, I'm lucky because I used to work as an interpreter, a simultaneous interpreter in French. And that was probably the best training for this kind of work, because you take meaning from one domain, translate it on the fly into a different language that makes sense to the receiver, and shows understanding and credibility. The thing that's fabulous about having this Seth background and understanding intuition is that I don't have to know anything about the business. I don't have to be engaged in that discipline. So if I'm consulting for a university, you can say, well, Helen, you know, that's great. You spent 40 years in the university. That's your field. You know it. But I was on retainer to a large bank, to an energy company, to big pharma, you know. Right. It's like, what do I know? I don't know any of that stuff.
Because your skill is actually in bringing in a different way of looking at reality and bringing in a certain skill of how to propagate that energy of a healthy organization. So it applies to any organization, and you don't have to know the content so much as helping them move or shift into that vibration. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, no, you do know the content. You anchor with almost nothing except the name.
Right. But you use that to build your intuitive,
Yeah, but very quickly you're into the nitty gritty. You're into, you know, what we were talking about CompuServe. One of my first business clients was a company that was entered into partnership with CompuServe back in the day. This is in the early 1990s. And we were doing synchronous, we were doing real-time forums and classes and conversations in 1992, 93. So when you're talking about that partnership, one of the things, I'll just give you an example. So I'm working with this client who is entering a potential strategic partnership with CompuServe. So what do we do to get ready for those meetings? First of all, I know the person with whom I'm working, but I don't know anything about the leadership of CompuServe. Right. So what you do is you say, who's going to be in this meeting with you? Who's going to be in the negotiation? And so I get a list of 8 people who are going to be in the room. Then you look at each of the people in the room and you ask intuitively the question, what's the one thing I, or the CEO in this case, needs to know about that one person? Where's that person coming from? What's their role in the organization? And what matters to them? So in this instance, the attorney who was doing the negotiation for CompuServe, one of the things that came up was that this person was on his way out and was leaving. Now, who's going to know that? It's not in the news. It's not, you know, it's got to come from Framework 2. It's got to come from some place other than what you might imagine. But the thing that was important about that and interesting about that was, since he had other things to do and other fish to fry, he wanted to hurry up and get it done. Right. So my client ended up with that information, with actually a better deal, because this guy was chafing at the bits to hurry up and get this negotiation done. Right. Ended up with a better agreement than he might have had that negotiating attorney wanted to hang out and see how long he could go. Right. So you see what I'm saying? It's taking information that's useful, that's helpful, that is about the person and the company, that you could not know through other means and
Right.
offering that information.
Right. And using information that's available from Framework 2, from the intuitive channels, to see why the organization is functioning in the way that it does, and how can you refine the process between these individuals so that it honors or sees
Both.
that bigger vision. Yeah.
It honors both parties.
Right, right.
In other words, you're not out to win, and
right.
Rip somebody. You looking in the field of probabilities. What you do when you work with intuition in business. One, I assume that businesses can exercise good intention.
Absolutely.
I don't set these dichotomies and these dualities, business is bad, poverty is good,
Right.
This company name means there's nobody good in that organization because I don't like what they're doing.
Right. It's big pharma, so let's just hate on them.
It's big pharma, right. They're all bad.
Right.
Can't go there. You look for, in that infinite field of probabilities, you look for the path of greatest success for all parties involved.
Yes.
If other things being equal, if you continue on this path, what's the most likely outcome? And what's the outcome that you're going to like the best? What's going to make you happy?
Yeah, so it's somewhat similar to what I do when I work with people and helping them unlock from negative beliefs. And sometimes I'm working with people where there's actually like clusters of beliefs that take on almost like fragmented aspects of personality, and you're seeing that they all have positive intention, even though there might be some aspect of the personality that pulls the plug when things get a little too intense. It's actually trying to protect the that being from some perceived danger. So it's seeing that everything has a positive intention, even within the personality, which is kind of like a little microcosm of organizational structures in the bigger sense, and it's also a reflection of the way the oversoul works with all the individual souls on another level. So I feel like all these, it's almost like a fractal representation of all these patterns of how we're coming together as people, as even aspects of one personality, multidimensionally speaking, multiple souls having multiple incarnations. And it is for the benefit of all. I think that's something that I really resonate with, is that no matter what organization you're in, if you come in there with that win-win, everybody wins attitude, there is the sense that there's an optimal way which everything will function, very similar to how this conference functions, that we can all come together and work to our passion and bring in what we're all excited about, and it creates a larger organization that serves the greatest good of all. That's just the way things work in the most optimal way. Now, of course, then we can drop down in frequency and go into like me versus you, and if I win, then you have to lose. And then it gets more fragmented and compartmentalized. And even in the personality structure, when people go into their little individual parts, it gets fragmented. And then there's all these warring parts, even within one individual, multiple perspectives that get triggered, in certain situations. You perceive a danger cue where there isn't, and now you're behaving in a negative way. But ultimately, that part is trying to protect you. It's just fragmented. So when there's an organization of individuals and they're all fragmented and everyone thinks everyone's out for themselves, you don't have a fully functioning organization, because there's a lot of fear, and there's just, you can't have cohesion when you're concerned that people are out to get you, or that you'll get the short end of the stick, so to speak. So it's really amazing. I think we're doing this healing work on all levels, organizational
the personal,
level,
the group,
personal level. Yeah. Yes.
And that's one of the reasons I love Seth's term of value fulfillment.
Yeah.
It takes it out of the win. It takes it out of this competition. Fulfillment, right. Value fulfillment means that when you're working with individuals, or I'm working with individuals or groups, the goal is for resolution, means embracing fulfillment, and
Yes,
having
yes.
permission to be fully expressed without that expression doing harm to another. That
Right.
there
Yes.
is always some path that permits being fully expressed
Yes.
without doing harm to another, whether it's a company or a person. And that's what's special about using metaphysical principles in daily life.
Right.
And if it's a family constellation, if it's community, if it's political parties, if it's
Right.
companies, that there is a place in the field of all that is that permits me to meet that declaration of the 4-year-old without walking all over anybody else on the way, except, of course, unwittingly. I know I have harmed people. I know I have made, my list is, even in this one focused personality, I got a long list of amends.
Sure, we all do, because we've all bought into various negative beliefs, and we all from time to time blindly act from them, of course.
But it's unintentional. And when, it's like what I think Oprah or Maya Angelou, somebody said, when you know better, you do better.
Right, of course, yes.
Once I realized that I've messed up,
right,
then
you can clean it up. You can make amends. You can, yes, absolutely. It's like you have an orchestra playing music and somebody's playing sour notes. Once they recognize, they can amend that. And it's not about being perfect. It's about the process of moving into greater and greater harmonization and synchronization. Mm-hmm. So I feel like a lot of what we're talking about, you can use musical terms to explain it to some degree, because you're finding individuals and you're getting them to find their pure tone and pure vibration, their alignment with who they truly are. And when each individual locks into that frequency, you create this beautiful harmonic symphony. And when people start to fall out of that, they buy into negative beliefs and they start believing that, they can't express their true selves, or they can't manifest their true passion. So now they're going to start doing something that they think will serve them, but isn't truly in alignment with who they are. Now it's like everyone's a little bit off of their frequency. And now the symphony starts to sound discordant. And then you wonder why there's dysfunction between, whether it's within an organization, within the family system, even within what sometimes people talk about internal family system, which is a form of psychology that talks about all the different parts and components of personality that are warring and not at odds with each other. So on all these different levels of organization, it's like we're helping people and these portions of ourselves and aspects to find that true vibrational frequency that is the truest approximation of our non-physical selves. How can we translate ourselves into physical terms that is in greatest alignment with who we truly are? And that, I believe, is the value fulfillment that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. And remember, that discordant sound is only discordant to us. The person who's making that sound probably thinks it's just fine. Thank you very much.
Maybe that's all they've been taught.
I'm thinking of Benjamin Britten, who's this sort of contemporary composer, and everybody thought he was nuts writing the music he wrote, because he was creating something new, and it was not 19th century classical European music.
Right.
So it could be discordant and just different, and it can be discordant and a signal that something's off, really. Those are two different kinds of discordance. You know what I mean?
And something I would like to add to that is that actually there is value in discordancy, because it helps us to recognize when there is a beautiful piece. It's like without darkness, how can we see the candlelight? The candle in the darkness analogy. It's because we've gone through so much discordancy. When we see the light, we really can recognize it. It looks beautiful because it's like the lotus coming out of the mud. It's that ability. So within all that is, I believe there's room for all of it, including the discordant notes, because that's a part of the process of, even to have an arc of transformation, we have to actually have the beginning of the story to have the ending. So for us to experience the contrast, I think there is room for that discordancy, although now at the age of awakening, we're awakening that we can move from discordant to more being in harmony and resonance with one another, from compartmentalization and fragmentation towards a greater synchronization. So it's like, as I'm hearing you describe it, I get this image. It's almost like you're a conductor within these organizations, helping each individual to play their true and unique note and get them all to harmonize with each other to create that beautiful harmonization and synchronization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. I think the other thing that's wonderful about Seth's perspective is that it's possible to experience good without having to have evil. That you don't all that is includes horror, sure. All that is permits anything,
right,
everything.
Because it is all that is.
Because it is all that is. On the other hand, it is possible, and this has kind of been my purpose in life, to live in a non-dualistic world. It isn't an either or option. I don't have to suffer and make somebody else suffer.
Absolutely.
In order to feel fulfilled.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to mess up. I'm going to create problems. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. But I think Seth is one of the few thought leaders who said it's possible to experience pleasure without pain, or
I believe
good
that, yes.
without evil. And I'm one of those who wants to keep, I keep trying to find that sweet spot. What is that? And how is that possible?
It's paradoxical, because it's like we validate all that is as all that is, which contains all of it. And at the same time, as soon as we validate it, we move into neutrality, into that 0 point where we're free to choose. We're actually free to choose the quote unquote positive, because that's the integrative state, and to choose harmonization, because we're not invalidating, we're not pushing away the negative, we're not discounting it, we're actually realizing that all that is contains all of it. So therefore we don't push against it, we simply choose the frequency that we prefer. And then we get to live in that value fulfillment of ourselves. And we're not here to control how other people experience their lives. They have the same free will that we do. So we can't force any kind of a teaching on anybody, because ultimately we don't, we appreciate being able to express ourselves as we are. Therefore, we wouldn't invalidate other people's choices. See, that's the thing, is we're all responsible for ourselves, essentially. And we can be responsible for, or we can be responsible to others in being our true selves, but we can't be responsible for them. Everyone has to make their own choice and their own arc of transformation. So I really believe that neutral point, when we're able to look at all that is and see, okay, there is all of it, it all exists, and it's all valid because it is all an aspect of all that is. And yet from that neutral point, we can choose those vibrations that we prefer, that are in alignment with who we truly are.
Yeah, it's funny. Seth talked about, and others do too, that some people feel more alive in war, that they have no experience, and that's one of the reasons they struggle. They feel more alive at the moment of potential death or murder than they've ever felt. And we as societies don't know what to do with that. We don't know. I mean, they come back and they don't know how to function in the so-called normal world. And I was born in a military family. And I've always been this sort of rabid pacifist. And I'm thinking, what in the world? Here you are, raised in a military family, and spent the first 20-some years of my life immersed in that. And here I am, this pacifist. And through working with the material, it's funny, I remember doing dream work like we all do, and regression work and all of that. And I discovered that there was a time when I was a headsman in England. Now, you know, not everybody believes in reincarnation, but I do. But I was very, in a very intense way, connected with this burly English man whose job it was to chop off heads. That was his work. And he wanted to do a good job. He wanted to make sure that he did what he was supposed to do with one stroke, that he didn't cause any more pain than necessary.
Than was necessary. Yeah.
And here he was killing people, you know, and I said, you see, there's another way to look at this. And I realized that my pacifism probably comes from some other stories hanging out there. These other probable Helens were not always running around going, you know, nothing right.
You know, all roles in the story are valid. You know, that's what's, you know, as soon as you stop pushing against everyone, you can actually live your life to be the example of what it means to live a life in harmony. But you can't force these stuff on people. You can't expect or insist people change or understand. Everyone is where they are. And that's the great paradox, is as soon as you make peace with that, your life becomes peaceful. As soon as when you're pushing against other people, trying to get them to, you know, behave or fall in line, you know, then your life becomes full of strife and full of pushing against. So it's the only way we can teach is by example. You know, that's what I've come to, is we just cannot force change on anyone, but we can demonstrate it by choosing that for ourselves. And then taking actions in accordance with that, which will help the society, which will naturally help. Because when we are our true pure vibration, we're putting out that frequency and we're acting on our passion and translating them therefore into physical terms. Very transformative work that will transform the society, but at the same time, we're not insisting that it transforms. So we're at peace being where we are, and we're at peace with the world being as it is, which has its dark and its light components. So there's a lot of paradox in all this.
Oh yeah. That's why we're still working at it. That's why we're still here going, where shall we go today?
But all roles are valid in the story. You know, the grand story of life. You know, we watch movies or we read books and we recognize that all the parts of the story make the story. That's what makes it the unique story that it is. Now, granted, as we shift higher and higher into vibrational, we will be shifting to versions of Earth where it's commensurate more and more with alignment and with harmony. But you know, at this stage, you know, we seem to be in this age of transformation where it feels almost as if there's multiple parallel realities we're looking at constantly kind of overlapping each other. It's like there's all these different dimensions and belief systems. And more than anything, now you're seeing it's like there's all these different ways of looking at reality, all the worldviews out there. It's just amazing. And you don't have to convince anybody of anything other than convincing yourself to live in alignment with your true vibration and put that out as an example.
And guess what? Even when we get there, you know, I think Seth talks about we'll be there by 2075 or something. Whatever date we arrive at this alignment, it too is a temporary state, whether that state is 100 years, 10,000 years, as some of the Christian texts say, because everything is in constant flux. It'll be a moment everybody goes, and then somebody's going to get bored and start some new mess, right? We're going to go at it again. You know, it's
challenge.
There you go. And we just decide where we want to duck in, and you know, I'm glad I'm my age now. I'm going to duck out, and let other folks have their fun fighting if they wish. So even that is not, harmony itself is transient.
Everything is, yes, everything changes.
There's no there. There's no end.
There's no end to the expansion. My sense is that we will eventually as we're transitioning from this dense vehicle of consciousness to a term that I coined, which is lucid waking, where we're recognizing the physical life is another dream that the soul is having. Another channeler likes to call that fourth density. So moving from third density to fourth density, just to give us some terms. But then I believe that as we keep expanding consciousness, we might actually shift to the point where we become quasi-physical, non-physical, and moving into greater and greater expansions of consciousness. So, but there will always be choices and forks in the road. And I believe that, Seth is asking us which world. There's multiple parallel realities for the expression of all that is. And so there's always these forks in the road and choices. And so some versions of Earth will take the fork on the right, others will take the fork on the left. One will move towards ascension, another will move towards, let's experience limitation again as a challenge and see what that feels like. So I think everything and anything goes, because when you realize all that is contains literally by definition all that is, and all probabilities and all possibilities, it's all there. And
it's all there now. There's some moments when I feel like such a wise kupuna, as we say here in Hawaii. I feel like such a wise person. And there's some moments I can't find my way out of a paper bag.
Right.
Both
are
true now. So that ascension moment is already happening, and that limitation moment is already happening. And in fact, between 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning, for me, I can be at least 17 varieties of both.
Absolutely.
I think that's the thing that's so exciting about Seth's framework, is that it's not Pilgrim's Progress, and I work from being unenlightened, and then all of a sudden I'm this enlightened being and I don't have to get reincarnated anymore.
Oh no, it's all
simultaneous. I can be dumb, I can be smart, I can be wise, I can be cruel.
All versions exist.
Compassionate, I can be narcissistic, all in the space of 5 minutes.
Yes, I feel like we're literally shifting through versions of ourselves, constantly just shifting through. Like you said, within an hour, how many versions of myself did I experience?
Listen, before coffee, after coffee.
Right. And to understand we do have that fluidity of consciousness is very freeing, because it means that you don't have to be that version that you define yourself to be. You can define yourself in other ways. There's other modes of behavior, not just the bag of tricks that we learn.
Yeah.
There's more. And then we start tapping into parallel simultaneous existences, and just our perspective is it's mind-blowing, literally mind-blowing.
Exactly. That's why we have to agree on being semi-wise or semi-silly for some moments, so we at least get a hint that we're looking at the same person or being the same person.
Right.
So we still have to kind of frame it.
We play the continuity game.
Yeah.
Yes. Consensus reality agreements, and then the continuity game of showing up relatively as a similar person in each moment.
I do have my clothes on. I didn't forget to show up without them. We'll agree on that.
That brings in another topic, though, is the physical body. As we are recreating the physical body in every moment, it's not just the personality self. We're actually recrystallizing the body. I don't know how many frames a second, but this idea that the body spontaneously emerges in each moment, click, 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 that's powerful. And I believe your talk will dip into some of that as you're dealing with health. That's just another can of worms we can open up at another time. But yes, the physical body, we recreate our physical body in each moment. So we don't always have to recreate the same sense of continuity within the physical body as we have bought into.
Exactly. And, you can play games. I do play game. Did I remember? I think I can't remember where in the cemetery where you remember to paint in a particular thing that, is it there or is it not there on your body? I have literally seen physical constructions appear and disappear overnight. The main thing is you just have to pay attention. I mean, I've seen bumps show up and not be there.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
I've had that experience. I wake up one day and I look at myself and I'm like, I'm not the same person I remember yesterday.
Who that?
I'm a different version. like literally.
That's not how I drew you the last time I looked in the mirror.
Right, and it's
who is that?
You break continuity just enough to tickle your physical mind and say, wait a minute.
Wait a minute. Yeah, I don't think I didn't do that. Right. Let's try this one again.
Right. Or whether you label it positive or negative, but definitely noticing that there's a shift. There are shifts. We create this sense of continuity, but honestly, I believe we're shifting all the time.
Mm-hmm. When I was born, everybody in my family said I looked like my father. And I look like my father's family. Now all I hear is I look like my mother and I look like my mother's family. So it's so interesting how, and they didn't look alike. So it's so interesting how perception, it's not only my own perception of myself looking in the mirror, because I was doing a eulogy for my aunt, and some of the people there were going, well, she's just like Juanita, who's my mother, she's looking just like Juanita. And I'm thinking, wow, everybody thought I was looking like the Stewarts, and all of a sudden I was looking like the Hamptons,
Right.
So I am creating my body, but other people are also creating their perception of my body.
They're creating their version of you. Absolutely.
And I look in the mirror now and I go, well, Mom, I tell you, this is a trip. I look and I see my mother, and I looked nothing like her, really. I had qualities, but I look and I go, there you are.
This gets into, when we start having the technology to actually investigate this, at what level are we changing cellular matrices and even activations of certain DNA codes from moment to moment to moment, based on what beliefs we're buying into or what energy we're running through, and, which parallel realities we're shifting into. It's going to be really amazing. I see this sometimes in healing work where people literally just shift into different versions of themselves, and they don't have the same, they shift out of certain conditions because they're choosing to buy into a different belief system. Like, that's a whole nother.
It's a whole nother thing about our creating our genes rather than simply being created by them. Correct. And the extent to which we can affect the hardwiring of our bodies.
And what is the hardwiring? Because consciousness comes first, and it's all in a spacious presence. So there is no, I was born this way. You are being born right now in this moment, in the spacious present. You are being born every second, billions of times a second, perhaps.
But we do have blueprints. We do have, and I don't know if I talked about it in the book
levels,
or not. I decided to be a Black person in this time.
Of course, there's themes
there are certain things that.
But you can certainly tap into other existences where you are.
Absolutely.
As we all have, those of us who are more sensitive to the other concurrent, we say past lives colloquially, but I really believe they're concurrent lives. We tap in, and, we've played every possible permutation, male, female, this culture, that culture. It's like we've done it all.
But talk about being a mutt. You should see my 23andMe data. It's like, man, where were you? And I believe that some of that is not only genetic history from linear genetic history, but I think some of that is also reincarnational history, that we retain elements, latent possibilities
Oh, yes.
for expression. It's not chance that I'm speaking French, you know. It's
right.
not
There's
chance
a connection.
that I'm drawn to
yes.
that world.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it's going to be quite a weekend, I guess, huh?
Yes. Right.
We have had some questions coming in.
Okay.
Oh,
so
okay.
This might be just a little moment here. Just to begin, from Tommy Pye, who is asking, with this holistic perspective, how does one avoid falling into divisiveness in today's climate?
Divisiveness.
How does one avoid falling into this divisiveness or divisiveness in today's climate? Clearly a reference to what we're experiencing in the political discourse.
Right.
That's actually, thanks for the question. That is my calling in this moment, is to, and I think that's kind of what I see as my purpose in this time. And that only comes through understanding. It's like understanding the headsman, you know, who instead of just going, those, whatever side you're on, those jerks,
yes.
You know, who are they? What are we missing? How are they feeling seen, unseen, loved, unloved, recognized, or not? What is it that their worldview gives them that my failing to pay attention to them has not? How do I perceive and understand that need, that hurt, and I assume some of it is hurt, that fun, their version of fun, which is not my own, you know? And Seth said, you know, I live in a safe universe. He didn't say the universe is safe. He said, I live in a safe universe. So it is possible for me, and I am so fortunate to live in a safe universe.
Yes.
But I wake up in the morning, and when I read the news and when I work with people locally and nationally, it is to answer that question. Where is that probability? Where is that coordinate point where we meet?
It's through the heart. It's opening our hearts, and like you said, is understanding that.
It's listening.
Yes.
Understanding.
Yes, absolutely.
Framing.
Opening those connections and opening that dialogue, those channels of communication, and really understanding each other. Because like we were saying, we started this talk talking about, you know, the symphony. And it's just like understanding why someone is playing that particular note. And it's not about forcing them to play a different note. You know, forcing people is never going to work ever. It's about understanding, like, you know, what brings them to that state that causes them to act in that particular way. And just, it's the harmonization. But also, I believe that with the ascension frequency, we are bringing everything to the surface. You know, we used to be able to sweep things under the rug. We used to be able to say like, oh, though we don't go there. We don't talk about that. So now it's like, we can't do that. And everything's being forced to the surface because the frequency of ascension is about harmonization and integration. So you can't compartmentalize your way into ascension. You have to bring everything out of the closet, and everything is front and center. And so that's why everything feels so heated, is because everything is coming to the surface, because that is a function of integrative energy. And now it's in front of us. We can't avoid it anymore. So that's part of it as well.
And on my Facebook page, I said I was in a military family, and I went to boarding school in France, and a lot of my classmates from the 50s have a very different politics from mine.
Right.
And yet I see my Facebook page, just a simple thing, and my Facebook page as trying in every moment to find a place where all of us in that same cohort can continue to talk together. We all loved our time in France.
Finding the common ground.
Show pictures of our dorms, and we talk about our sports team, or we talk about moments that we shared in the 1950s. There weren't a lot of Black folks in my school. And we worked it out. We were in dorms together. We were in sports and classrooms together. And today, our politics are totally divergent, but we manage a way to continue to communicate. I haven't had to block anybody. In fact, I don't.
Right.
Because you don't agree with me, I'm going to block you.
Right. That's more compartmentalization and fragmentation.
Exactly. We find ways to find each other over our love for gardening or pets or photography or our time overseas or whatever. There's always
a common
place
ground
where we meet, always.
And it's also having the understanding that two divergent points of views can coexist. It's this and that. I don't have to convince you to believe what I believe. I don't have to be convinced by you to believe what you believe. We can believe our own individual way of framing reality and understand that we can have integrity with one another and have divergent worldviews. And
integrity and caring. It's not that we care about each other still.
Right.
We're not only not converting each other, but that deep love for a deep and shared experience persists.
And recognizing that it's actually a strength when there are multiple points of view, and that somebody's different point of view stimulates me to find and refine my point of view. Otherwise, if everything's homogenous, well, we'd be bored out of our mind. Right?
Boring.
And so learning to care and to honor other people's points of view, and at the same time realizing you're not threatened by that. I'm not threatened because somebody else has a different way of seeing something. That's interesting. It's just another way.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Lilia.
Yes. Okay. Well, there is great concern for this particular issue, just among the various questions, but one that is related, but now taking it to the context of corporations and groups. Working with corporations or any large group, thinking of them as entities, what methods could we use to bring a sense of unity on an inner level? So that was a question from Chiron O'Keefe, or Sharon. What methods could we use to bring a sense of unity on an inner level?
Well, I think that is the gift of intuition. That when whenever I do a session for somebody, I always start with a name and I get an anchor phrase. And that anchor phrase kind of shapes that discussion for an hour or a week or a day or whatever. I try to find, and you can do this, by the way, in fact, I have CEOs and other people I work with do this. Ask the question, what one action, if any, can improve the situation? What one action, if any, because maybe there's nothing to do, when we have to also recognize that things sometimes can't be fixed. What one action, if any, could improve the situation? What is the one thing I need to know in order to make this conversation go well today or tomorrow or next week? Who's going to be in the room? What is the one thing that individual is concerned about? And the answers to these questions come in 7 seconds or less. You don't think, you scribble. To me, it's chatter. Blah, 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 blah. Somebody says, and 7 seconds is a long time. It's really a nanosecond, frankly. And if you've done radio work or like we're doing here, you can't have blank airtime. So you frame the question and you start getting an answer immediately, even if the answer makes no sense. You lean into it, you write it down, you blather it, you speak it, you feel it, you seed a dream about it and say, tonight, I've got this big meeting coming. Tonight, I'm going to dream about the most effective way to be in this conversation tomorrow. Yes. So to me, that is the endless gift of intuition. That's where you go beyond the mind and you even go beyond the heart. You go to this fusion arena outside of time and space, this area, I'll call it, where you know each other fully, you understand each other fully, you assume that you are all functioning with good intent, and then you ask the question, what's the one thing I need to know? What one action, if any? And if the answer is there's nothing you can do about it, drop it, let it go. You're not going to fix this. And if you're looking at mergers, and one company I worked with was looking at buying out another company, and intuitively I got, it's not the one. Not going to work. So I will go, and I know Seth talks a lot about, prediction and not predicting because everything is unpredictable. But I think you can still go to the most likely outcome if whatever your list is. And so finding that space through questions, through lists, through 7 seconds or less, knowing nothing. I think that's the way that's the tool I would use to answer that question. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Any other questions in there?
I think the others are quite similar as well, but we do have a logistical question, whether this particular conversation is being recorded and so is that a yes?
Yes, it is. So,
okay.
So basically what happens is after we finish Facebook Live, the live feeds are available for replay at any time. And I believe as soon as they lose popularity, they just kind of go down in the feed within the group, but they're always accessible.
Excellent.
And the conference itself will also stream to our YouTube channel. So it'll become a channel available on YouTube as well. So it'll definitely be available for replay.
Fantastic. That was definitely included. Definitely a question. And sort of
just make sure I still have my clothes on when it's a replay.
Yeah, Jeff.
And my blouse is the same color. Okay, we'll try to paint that in.
Right. No discussion. I think that sums it up.
Okay.
All right.
Well, we should probably start thinking about wrapping it up because I feel like we have so much to share and so much to express. And as I've been mentioning, and Jeff and I have been mentioning, and we've been talking, all three of us, Lilia, me and Jeff, we are going to keep doing this. So after the conference, we will keep having experiences such as this. So this will be an ongoing conversation. So we don't have to unpack it all at this red hot minute, but we will be back. For sure, we will be back. Of course, we'll be back this entire weekend for the conference, but after that, you will see versions of this materializing and popping into framework one all over the place. So definitely look for more. But right now I do feel like we've been going at it. It's 11:11 synchronistically enough. It's a powerful gateway. So let's go ahead and bring it to a close. Do you, Helen or Lilia, do you have anything you'd like to add before we close?
Thank you, Lilia.
Oh, thank you, Helen. Really appreciate your sharing with us today and contributing your wisdom. Clearly, just for me, this really, again, further underscores, the power of coming together in groups, coming together to co-create, to weave together this transformative field for all of us. Yes. So I am so grateful to you, grateful to Tom, and so grateful to Jeff also, who is just channel that through. There is no question about that. So
thank you, Jeff.
Great. So if you could stay on after we disconnect, but let's go ahead and Jeff, you can give us the final goodbye to the live feed.
Well, hi, I can hardly wait to see all these old friends and to make some new friends at the California Seth Conference 2021. It is such a thrill and an honor for us to be a part of this together and to be invited to talk to you about everyday life, Seth and everyday life. The Seth material is really the foundation of my intellectual history and my metaphysical history. It's not my first experience or my first exposure, but is my foundational worldview after being in the university, after living in the world in many parts of the world. It became and remains the most important source for understanding my life and mass events that I see happening around me every day. Now, I was born in World War II. My dad came back from the war and my parents christened me. And at that christening ceremony, I felt like a grown-up. I was 4 years old and I felt like an adult. They were giving me to God and I was committing to some purpose yet to unfold in my life. And I can remember today as clear as rain, as clear as if it happened yesterday, that I used that moment to decide I would be who I am for the reason that I am in this time, in this space, and this focused personality. There was another event that was really transformational. My parents lived in Japan. We were stationed in Japan. And at that time, everybody had to have their tonsils out because of the fear of polio. And I come out of surgery only speaking French. We were living in Japan. I'd never studied French. And my mother tells me the doctors were running around trying to find somebody in Misawa, Japan, who could speak French and get me through the recovery process. As soon as the anesthesia wore off, I had no recollection of the French. But 3 years later, my dad was stationed in France. I went to high school there. I graduated in France. I ended up eventually learning to speak French fluently, maybe with the help of my other selves. And I continue to work in it to this day. So, by the time I got around to the nature of personal reality and the individual and the nature of mass events, it was like, yeah. Like somebody else said in one of their intros, here's somebody who's talking what I've always believed, always known in some deep portion of the self. So I've had a very mainstream career. I taught university, worked as an academic administrator, worked as an interpreter, worked in Africa and Europe and the Caribbean, had a regular life, but always
always somewhere underneath, these questions kept popping up for me. How did that happen? Where does this information stored? How do these experiences get explained? It certainly didn't get explained in my methodology classes at BU, where we were flipping coins and talking about probabilities. I knew the probabilities was a much broader subject than anything I faced in graduate school. So while I worked, while I parented, while I was a caregiver, I kept paying attention to questions about the self and about this constant creation of the world and my own body. Two things happened. One, in 2015, I was diagnosed with cancer and told I had at the outset 2 months to live. Now, after a 33-year relationship, my partner died, was ill. I learned a lot about probabilities there and the physical body. Fell in love again 2 years later. And all of a sudden, I'm so thrilled with my life and I've got cancer. It's like, well, if I were my own client, I'd be asking the question from a Sethian perspective, well, why is this showing up now? What am I supposed to do with this? Why now? I'm having too much fun. Well, what is it you're missing? What is it you're not paying attention to? So this has brought me home again. And every day I find myself asking the question, well, did you mean it? Did you mean it when you said, I create my own reality? Did you mean it when you said, I live in a safe universe? Even if the rest of the world is crazy, I live in a safe universe. I live in a safe body. I can trust my impulses. I can tell those doctors yes or no. I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling that way. And in some ways, I have the privilege and the responsibility to put my life, my very life, on the line 24/7 with the question, did you mean it? So I invite you to join me and we'll talk about this. It's not going to be a heady discussion. It's going to be a down, gritty discussion about bodies. So I hope you'll join me in that session. I have a website that I've had now for about 15 years. I have blog posts, published a book called 7 Seconds or Less, having to do with business applications of intuition. And when I left the university and while I was building UMS, I've been a professional intuitive. And so the book is about how you work with companies to use intuition. So take a look, enjoy, and I hope to see you soon. I can hardly wait.